And welcome back to the third segment of our show this morning. As Marlene had mentioned earlier, we switched things up a little bit, and now we're going into our conversation with representatives of the Student Union of Belize as they discuss youths and COVID-19. With us virtually are three guests. We have President of the Student Union, Chen. Good morning, Kevin. We also have Vice President Nathan Lisbey and the Student Affairs Director, Dominique Noralez. Good morning, folks.
Hi, good morning.
So it seems as if though we're going to be getting multiple perspectives on how young people in Belize have viewed the COVID experience or continue to view the COVID experience. Let's first of all begin by getting your individual impressions of what you've been experiencing under this particular state of emergency based on the entire COVID-19 threat to the country. Let's start with you, Dominique.
Okay, well, for me, it has been, I'm a very numbers-driven, policy-driven person. And so I've been paying attention to a lot to how we have been responding. Of course, we can say that we have done well. I think today is the 28-day mark. And so we're without a positive COVID test. But I've just been very, from my point of view, constructively critical of how it is that we move forward in terms of the human security aspect. How do we deal with making sure that the frontline workers, no matter if they're healthcare workers or cashiers or police officers, are taken care of? How we make sure that our people are fed and will continue to be fed? How we make sure that students and teachers indeed don't lose track of where we're going. And I have a very soft spot in my heart for students who aren't in Belize, students in the diaspora who are stuck in countries that have been or are epicenters of this COVID-19. So it's looking at several perspectives for me, the human element of security of food, the whole ontological security aspect of whether or not people feel that they are secure enough as individuals to get through this and get on the other side.
All right, so let's move on to Kevin then.
Yes, good morning. Well, for me, I have been monitoring the situation from the beginning of the crisis until now. And what I can say is that I think that our government has really done a fairly good enough job compared to other countries in the region. Mm-hmm. Personally, for me, it has been sort of a difficult phase because I have never been used to being at home all the time, having nothing to do. It's very stressing. It gets very stressing. Yeah.
All right, and then yourself, Nathan?
Yes, good morning. I want to wish all the mothers a happy Mother's Day.
All right.
And for me, well, this pandemic has been a really tolling because I'm a sports enthusiast and on the sports aspect, the athletes out there are in contact with each other, so not watching sports has really been a hard time for me. And on the student aspects on this, I feel like students are at home, they are bored. Well, I'm bored, so and yeah, I'm bored at the moment, so this is a learning experience for me, so I never been through a phase in my life like this, so
yeah.
It's a learning experience.
Well, none of us have.
All of us.
Yeah. I wanna go back to, the National Student Union was formulated with tertiary level students, I believe, from different educational institutions, and you really represent I think what has been a missing part of the conversation in terms of presenting a unified voice, or young people who are in the educational process and who are not necessarily just identifying or speaking on behalf of their sole student body. You're talking about young people in general. So when the Ministry of Education put forward what would be their suggested way forward during the pandemic, I know that there was some reaction from the student union, and the first issue was accessibility? Clearly, because you guys are joining us via Zoom, that's not something that personally affects you. But can you talk about how you're able to gauge who is still benefiting from the education that they were hoping to access and who's been left behind?
Well, from what we have heard from some of our union members and just scrolling social media, you know that some students just have an issue with accessibility.
Yeah.
So we often, availability and accessibility, I always say availability and accessibility are two different things.
Yeah.
And so you find students who aren't attuned to online learning. I could tell you that I've tried it, it's not for me. So there's the module of learning that's the issue, and then there's the accessibility. Because as great as the internet may be, I may only have one laptop in my house and I have 2 tertiary level students and we have class at the same time, or we just don't have internet at all, or it's just that, or I had to, even when I had online classes while we were in regular school mode, I had to go to the internet cafe or go to a resource center. So accessibility is always an issue. And if you talk about students who don't live in urban centers where most technological investments go into, you then again recognize that not everybody has access and there's not equitability across the board in terms of what students can access and what kind of students can access it. So it's always been from the sentiment of our union members that this can't be a wide brush kind of painting. It has to be as tailored as possible given the urgency and the quickness with which we had to switch over.
Yeah. Any other perspectives?
Yes, I have to agree with my colleague there. It's access. Most students in rural areas don't have access to the internet or a computer. So I agree with her on that. Yeah, and for me, I am currently a UB student and I'm doing online classes. So I have no problem with that. I have to applaud UB for their use of the internet online. So it has been a good experience for me so far.
But you find that there are others who are your peers at school who are also subjected to issues of accessibility or the lack thereof, correct? Because while you on one hand may be able to enjoy the idea of having the internet at your access to be able to do your online courses, perhaps someone from deep south may not have the same access based on the fact that they traveled to Belmopan to sit in a classroom and be administered their lessons, correct?
Yes.
Very correct.
Very correct.
Let's get it. Yeah, go ahead, Dominique.
No, well, in the very many hats that I wear, I get to experience to travel this country. And there are some villages, some spaces where getting road access is a problem. Getting electricity is non-existent. And so talking about the tools of the laptop or the phone or the tablet, you don't even know if you're going to get Digicel or Smart. You're going to get Tigo or Claro or something else that doesn't work for us, right? So we often forget. We forget very quickly, or we continue to disregard those who are most marginalized, and it becomes exacerbated when we hit a level of crisis and then we realize, oh damn, there were some people who never have access when we had good times, and then we just don't know how to translate that, and that continues to be a problem. The UB has several campuses, of course, and when we had our forum with our members, and I don't want to take up too much time because I have 2 colleagues here, but one of the things that we spoke about is that UB has 4 campuses across the nation, and we don't only focus on UB because of UB. We focus on UB because we see that as a premier tertiary level institution, and that's the institution that will take the lead. And so we think that whatever UB does, a lot of tertiary institutions will follow the lead and try their best to take up with that. So I don't want people to think that we're attacking the University of Belize, because we're not. We're just using that as the space where everyone else will take the lead from.
Didn't the student union put forward a position on the issue of having people withdraw from classes from UB?
Yes, we had a position that was the give to encourage students to use the I believe it was the incomplete form because, like I previously mentioned, UB gives two options to its students.
Yes.
One was to withdraw completely from the course, meaning you will be done with your classes entirely for the entire semester. And the other option was to do incomplete form. What that incomplete form does is that it just transfers your grades that you currently have, to your next semester or whenever you want to take the class again. So that doesn't cause any, well, I shouldn't say disruptions because then it puts you back a semester, but it doesn't cause any of your efforts, any of your achievements to be lost, so to say, because of the crisis. So we have been encouraging our students to use the incomplete form because the withdrawal form, the deadline for that has already elapsed.
Plus it nullifies whatever credit you would have achieved in this particular semester, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to get in here. I think,
like what my colleagues said.
Go ahead, Kevin. I'll let you finish.
Okay, like what my colleague said, I think it's really about accessibility, and this crisis just shows us how much we need to invest in our rural areas as much as we do in our urban areas, because I have been speaking with a lot of my colleagues, student government presidents across the country, and most schools, urban schools, for the most part, they don't have a lot of issue with students being able to access the online courses. It's only schools that are way up north or way down south that don't have that type of accessibility, don't have internet access, don't have laptops. And I think it's a wake-up call to all stakeholders in education that, you know what, the accessibility and the availability of education to these rural communities and other communities in Belize needs to be improved.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Regarding what Kevin mentioned about UB, at one point, I think the president wanted all students who did not have access to the internet or computer withdraw from their class. And I think it was Kevin who got in contact with him so he can change that, if I'm correct. I just wanted to mention that because...
No, I didn't contact the president for that, sorry.
Okay, I think this was a main issue at first because he wanted students to withdraw from their classes.
Yeah, the first release that went out spoke of withdrawing, and quite a number of students, in fact, got in touch with us concerned about that.
It was a bit too heavy-handed.
Yeah. So you're saying that your suggestion as the union is to file for an incomplete course, which then allows you to continue at the next semester where the classes is offered again. Again, the only concern there is that for people who perhaps were already planning to finish their studies this summer, they will now have to add on an additional semester. So that's the primary concern now.
Yes, it's the primary concern. And I think there's always a financial cost. There's always a cost to education outside of just paying tuition and fees and all of that.
Yeah.
And even so, right? Even if classes continue online, you will have to make an investment which you probably don't have given the economic crisis, into hardware and into getting internet hooked up. I think the President Sanpat had made a request to telecommunication companies to offer some sort of subsidized service to students, but then you don't know what infrastructure exists to facilitate that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just to me, you can't make suggestions like that and one not advocate for it. So there has to be, and I have said this already, there has to be an interface between the president and the leaders of those telecom companies to ensure that this happens. And then you have to make sure that there's an infrastructure that exists, because my president at my university can't say, okay, you be a phone subsidized service, but then I have no lamp posting in my area. Like it's a lot to consider, and I know we can't solve all the issues, but we still have to keep them in mind to make sure that no one's left behind, or that we give people the best shot at completing university, at doing what they can do in a time where all of our plans have been thrown into the air. And even if you don't have the answers, let me know that you're thinking of me.
Yeah.
Let me know that you have considered my plight, because I know the university knows the plights of students when there's time to pay tuition and you have to go to the finance office to kind of restructure how you pay your finances, and you have to be able to justify that. So we are aware of the plight of students and aware of some of their issues, and aware that we don't have perfect students living in a perfect world, from perfect families, from perfect communities, because our country is not perfect. But we need to do the best with what we have.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I think what you're saying is such a critical point. You know, we think of decision making sometimes, and we look at what we know in our own personal lives, or the people around us, or the people we're exposed to know, to guide our decision making. And so, yes, thinking of getting internet access available is one thing, but you painted a very real scenario earlier, Dominique, which is, one, do they have a laptop in the house? Is it a shared laptop? You know, is it something where it was somebody who's doing school part-time and has to work from home already? So there are many other elements that may pose challenges, and it's probably a great time to take stock and find out what the challenges are across the board.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I think people to all know where our students are at, no, and just influence, put that into policy. There is no way that you can make any plans about the people who your policy affects without talking to your people. The UB has said that they sent out online surveys to students. I don't know, because I'm not a student of the University of Belize, I don't know how that survey looked. Maybe Kevin and Nathan can help.
Yeah.
But I don't know how it is that those students saw that survey, how it is that they filled that out. Because I guess the university then assumed that, okay, if you could fill out an online form, then, you know, you probably have access to class. There are a lot of gray areas that I can't fill because I'm not the president of the university.
Yeah.
But I hear the plight of students, and I read the plight of students online. And we know that the university has had some tech issues in the past. I know Kevin can attest to that. I remember him mentioning that when we had the demonstrations with the unions. But the university, even their 5-year plan, I think it is, only in their technological improvement that they wanted to achieve for 2020, the improvement that was of highest regard was just improving hardware, changing printers, changing computers. But you see how we can't go to school, so no matter if you improve computers and printers that campus, because I can't access that there. And even when you look at tuition, they're printing fees and miscellaneous fees and all of the other things where I know can't use, you know, like it just. So there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to consider, and we have to have our heads at the table to be able to figure it out.
So where does that place you guys as the National Student Union? And Dominique, you said it before, you know, and I was trying to make that clear. People think the National Student Union is the student union of UB, but you're different. You are an independent body of tertiary level students, not associated with any one university. So you are also kind of compiling concerns of all the tertiary level institutions and other students, I'd imagine, and putting your perspective forward. What do you hope to be the role of the student union at this time, where we're about to close off this semester that you know, was very challenging for many, and moving into summer and even the new school year?
Kevin, maybe you want to take that one?
Well, like you said, we are the National Student Union. We are not the student union of UB, just that UB has the majority of our membership, and also they tend to give it the most amount of headache. I'm not gonna lie about that. But as the National Student Union, moving forward, like we had a forum last week, I think it was last week or last week, something like that. And we had discussed these things and we had listened to our students, and that is what we want to be in the way moving forward, because a lot of our students' voices are not being heard, especially during this crisis. Different stakeholders in education have really just dismissed students to some extent. They're not hearing their voice. So what we want to do towards the end of the semester is want to listen to our students. We want to get feedback from them. How was their experience like during this crisis? Sorry, my dog again. But we want to get their experiences from this crisis so we can learn in the future if we want to, if we ever go through this again, God forbid. But yeah, we want to learn from what we have experienced here today and during this crisis for our future.
Are you engaged with any of the schools directly to kind of advocate on behalf of students? One of the things that we haven't started discussing as yet is how this pandemic will affect what classrooms will look like when they do resume back to face-to-face contact. And across the world, we've seen where class sizes have shrunk just to be able to allow for that social distancing. I don't know what's in store for Belize, and we haven't heard anything along those lines. But if we are to look at what's happening in other places, these are possibilities. How do you make sure you're a stakeholder in that conversation to make sure that students' needs and concerns are met?
Well, just before Kevin comes and gives his perspective, I think the first thing, what is paramount for me as Dominique Noralez and then as Director of Student Affairs is to make sure that students are a part of the conversation, that students are having the conversation.
Yeah.
Because I can't represent you if I don't speak to you.
Yeah.
And the same goes, I can't represent you if you don't speak to me. And so part of that forum that Kevin mentioned, which happened on the 27th and 28th of April, was one, having a conversation with the education sector and that question of how classes are going to look. Are we going to need more buildings? That equals more investment in our education. And we all already know that the education budget for Belize is the second largest budget, just below the Ministry of Finance. Mm-hmm. Will that investment happen? You have to look at the level of ICT available, because again, ICT is much more than internet access and fast internet access. It's students' ability to use it. If we look at the pedagogy, the pedagogical aspect, our teachers and instructors, professors, whatever title you want to give them, are they equipped to teach students on an online e-learning kind of environment? Mm-hmm. And we can't forget, Marlene, we can't forget the families in this. And I say that only because I live in a household with four other people. Mm-hmm. And it took immense coordination. It takes immense coordination every day to make sure that my brother isn't playing music loud, that my grandmother is okay, that my sister is okay, that my mom is okay, my uncle is okay. And it takes immense pressure to make sure that everybody knows that I'll be on this thing for an hour and a half on WB or on this interview, making sure that it's quiet enough that I could concentrate. Yeah. So imagine having to learn in an environment where a space is small, and you have shared resources. I think these are the things we need to pay attention to, and we know that violence is an issue in some of our homes. There is so much to make sure that students are given the best quality education in the most reasonable time. Yeah. And so when you talk about investment, there is a social capital investment, and there is that financial investment into making sure that whatever the new reality looks like, the quality of education is not further compromised, because we can't afford that. We can't afford to shoot our human resource in the leg, because we go to university because we want to make sure that we influence the development of this nation. We don't go to university just because, we got $20,000 to just fling away, because we don't. We go to university to make sure that whatever contributions we make to national development is one that is based on what the country needs and where we want to see it go.
And the quality of that education is important, not just to you as a student, but of course to wherever you go after you graduate from school. You want to be able to take that level of knowledge into that environment.
Exactly.
So you are advocating to be able to have a space at the table and ensure that you are a part of the conversation. That is encouraging to hear. You know, we did focus quite a bit on UB, just in terms of a general synopsis. How are the other tertiary institutions doing in having made that rapid transition to online? And are there any concerns there?
I want to jump in on a...
Well,
Go ahead, Nathan.
I want to jump in on a serious matter for the farmers who are not... for the farmers who are not taking the CXC or the... The nursing students who are not taking PSC. This is a major issue because the government provides, I think, the tuition to those who excel or do good in the PSC or the CSEC. And I think this is a major issue we are facing here because the pandemic has really affected the economy in Belize. And our main source of income is tourism, which is 49.9%. And the tourism sector is being greatly affected by this pandemic. And so I think if we had invested more in our agriculture sector at this time, this would have helped stabilize our country more, because I think we have depended too much on the tourism sector for income in Belize. If we had helped the farmers across the country to provide food, we could have generated at least a more stabilized system for our workers here. Because at the current moment, I think the government wants the PSU workers to take a reduction in their salaries. Why don't the Prime Minister and his ministries take a pay cut on their salaries first? Why do they want the PSU workers and the teachers? Because some of these PSU workers and teachers need these salaries so they can generate income for their families too, and buy the same equipment they need to carry out the online learning. So there's a lot of questions out there we can ask ourselves. But
just to clarify there, so Nathan, the ministers have taken 1 month salary cut. Just so we don't leave that misinformation
it's
there.
The increments that they're looking to waive or defer as opposed to the actual salaries, right? Salaries remain untouched.
But we're quickly running out of time, and I wanted to get some final points from you guys. So Kevin, maybe you guys can start. Just what do you want to say to the general public, to the educational institutions about ensuring that the needs of students are met?
With regards to your earlier question, Ms. Marlene, you said that, well, I have been speaking to a lot of other student government presidents across the country, from all the way up in Muffles to SJ, CJC, and all across the country, and their institutions don't seem to really have an issue with the transitioning from the traditional classroom to an online setting. From what I've heard from most SG presidents is that their schools asked the students if they had access, and majority of them did say yes, that they have access to the courses online. And those who didn't have access, I think they were given the course material in paper. I think that's what I've heard, paper, or other special considerations were made for those students who couldn't access the material. It is only the University of Belize who has instructed its students that, you know what, if you can't access, you have two options.
Yeah.
Only UB has done that so far.
Only UB. So the others were just prepared for online?
So I think Galen, Galen was one of the universities that had an online ecosystem already. I am not intimate with the SJC and the other universities, but I know most schools, I think even UB had an online ecosystem already, but I just don't know what the struggle was. I guess it's just the huge population or resources, or I don't know what it was. But it seemed that the transition was a bit bumpy. I see that we only have about 3 minutes here, so I'll just make my final commentary. For me, it's I always encourage people to look at what is being said and match it up with your own story. No, so if there's, and I don't want the stakeholders and duty bearers to feel that we just want to quarrel, because we're not the quarrel. What happens, what we are charged to do and what our mandate is to make sure that students are taken care of and that their voices are amplified. We are not telling students what to tell us, and we just want to go there and the blast out thing, and because we want to quarrel. It's not that. I think the constructive way of any democracy, of any space where people are to live together, there has to be communication. So if you put out a policy and I critique it, that's not about you and not about me. About the 4,000, 5,000 people who I represent, who they said that this don't work for them, and we have to say something about it. So that would be my last thing. And make sure, and students, just please stay engaged, because you don't want something to just happen to you. You want to make sure that you want it to happen and that you play a role in both doing that, playing a role in making that policy, and of course implementing that. That will be my final comment.
And I think that's a great closing point, especially since we're out of time. Thank you so much, and you can of course get in touch or follow what the National Student Union is doing. But you guys have a Facebook page that you're very active on. And people can be able to get engaged with the conversation there. Students and also people who've been looking on and have had concerns, questions about the educational sector. That is it for Conversation with the Union. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up, so stay tuned.